Hey friends, welcome back. Today we are tackling a topic you requested, mastering build-ups and drops in Ableton Live. If you've ever wondered why some tracks take you on a journey and whip those crowds into a frenzy while others just don't, it all comes down to understanding tension and release. Today, I'll be breaking down the psychology behind effective build-ups, showing you some go-to techniques of mine for creating drops that are impactful, and walking you through my entire creative process of that step by step. A word of warning, of course, I'm showing you my real workflow here. That's messy parts and all. There's no shortcuts, no magic tricks, just the genuine creative process behind tracks that move people. So as always, I'll be answering your production questions live in the chat, so do drop them in there and do say hello if you're here in the stream. Let us know where you're tuning in and listening from. And of course, if you've got specific questions for builds and drops, that would be perfect for today's stream. So whether you're struggling with those build-ups and they're flat, or you want to create drops that sort of tug on people's emotions, you'll walk away with some concrete examples today you can use immediately. So let's dive into the art and science of build-up and drops. So let me just tidy up my screen a little bit here. And let's sort of start by playing through a bit of an example of the track that we're going to be using today. So what I've done is grabbed a project that was collecting dust on my hard drive, a little idea that I'd started, and it's in the arrangement view. It is arranged as in the sounds and instruments that we have at the moment, but there's not been much attention paid to the things that we're going to be looking at today, which is the build and the drop. So let's sort of jump to around bar 33 here, do a little playthrough. We can test the levels as well of my mic and the music, and then we can get stuck into today's build and drop tutorial. All right, that will probably do to give you a taster of what we're working with. And now we can start to get stuck into any questions you have and trying to understand what makes a good build and a drop, and how do we do that to our music, whether we're working with audio or MIDI. And different genres of music obviously may well influence how you go about this. So I'm going to start with some basic techniques, and then we're going to sort of build up to a couple more advanced ones. As I said, I'll walk you through steps that I use quite often, and then we'll explore some that maybe we haven't thought of. And what I've done here is I've kind of grouped up the same stems. So this is the full track idea that you just listened to between here and here. So all of these tracks. And then what I've done is I've kind of copied all the same tracks down and just grouped them, switched that group off. So we'll be able to listen back in a little bit, and we'll do a bit of verses today. We'll be able to listen back and say, okay, that's what we've kind of changed. So let's start with, I would say that I'm fortunate when it comes to arranging songs and tracks as I have a DJing background. And I think for the DJs amongst us here, if you're writing electronic music and you also DJ and play electronic music, you might be very familiar with some of the effects and tools that when you're playing other people's tracks, you can start to create your own little builds or take away frequency and change kind of the feeling, the tension and release. So we're going to be saying those words quite a lot. They're fundamental to builds and drops, right? Breaks, choruses, all these different things. The thing we're looking for is tension and release. So what I've done here is I'm working in Ableton Live 12, and I've grabbed the awesome brand new auto filter, just dropped it on the master track here, right? And one of the very first tools that we sort of use, even if you're not DJing. So as a DJ, we've got sort of EQs for each track, and we've got gain, we've got reverbs and echoes and things like that. But you know, even if we're not DJing, often the first thing we reach for on an instrument is the filter cutoff, and we sweep that around. And okay, it sounds really nice for a variety of reasons, but it's going to sweep the sound from dark to bright, and it also can add a lot of movement. And it can also add tension and release. Just looking into the chat, already got a hello there from Capers. Great to see you. Hello from Brooklyn, New York. Amazing. Hi from Ibiza. It's nice and hot here. Not sure how you're doing in Brooklyn, but it's sweaty and hot and humid here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play what I just played a second ago, and I'm going to grab my MIDI controller here. And as you can see, I'm over on that macro. Actually grabbed the wrong macro there. I'm just going to go back to the DJ filter one. And this auto filter in 12, by the way, the 12.2 update, it's amazing. We've got this filter and we can sweep it from low pass to high pass and cut away frequency. So what is tension and release? Well, let's just have a listen and just sweep that filter around. And that's our first kind of, just to get in context, tension and release, right? I'm just going to try and work it a bit in this breakdown that's coming up here. So into the build. So this is the build into the drop. Let's just try and sweep the filter a bit in the drop. So looking at that, the brand new auto filter and the DJ control, I've just given you a little bit of a window here to something you could do in your track, right? You can absolutely put that on the master track and you can do exactly what I was doing. We could have recorded that automation there of that filter, sweeping away the lows, bringing down the highs. But that's essentially what tension and release is, right? It's all about creating that tension and release, and a filter does an amazing job. And as I said, Ableton 12.2's auto filter with the DJ mode in there, which you find down here, by the way. You just drop the filter on the track here and you're looking for the DJ control, and away you go. What I was doing, I was limited a little bit by my hands, but I was tweaking the resonance as well as sweeping the cutoff. Capers has said it's hot here as well. Well, there you go, mates. Understand. So hopefully you've got a cool beverage or something next door to the computer or phone or whatever however you're watching. And by the way, if others of you are here as well, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. Say hello like Capers did. It's nice to have some community vibes here and good vibes. So let's have a look here. We're going to start, as I said, with the basics. I've written quite a lot of notes. That's what we've got from the top down to here. We've got our track below. So in our build section of the track, we're looking to build tension, and I didn't spell that very well, but drums is meant to be drama. So tension and drama in the build, and then in the drop payoff, we're going to release some of that tension, and that's what we're kind of thinking to do. And when we're creating that tension release, we're creating anticipation of what's going to happen. Now, the first tip, or the second tip I'm going to give you, is like what we listened to so far. You could do an awful lot, and when I'm teaching artists and coaching, you could do a lot by just arranging your parts really well of what your music idea is. So as I said, we're working between here and here. This is our music idea here. So if you look here, the busiest section pretty much, which I think is quite logical, is where the build is. So you can arrange, and a good arranger will almost get that tension and release done just how you lay out the parts, right? So there's not much tension over here. There's a little bit of building energy here. Adding new parts, taking things away. So the first thing I would say, taking things away as powerful as adding. So I often see people when they're beginning to arrange tracks and they're beginning to do this, just keep adding. Adding is, you know, obviously a way to work, but it's not necessarily always the answer to building tension release. If you just keep adding, you're just adding layers of frequency like a cake, and you're just building up more and more layers. So try sometimes taking away things. Very often what I'll do is I'll play all the parts of my track like I can here. Let's loop this. And then I'll just start taking everything out. And then just add bits back in. So let's just click away here. There we go. And we'll just have all the drums. And we might find that some of these stems don't need to be in that loop. And that might be understanding what we could add and remove. So I'm very often like taking things in and out to really get a feel for what happens when I do that, same as what I was just doing with the filter, sweeping things in and out. So again, we're starting with the basics, but hopefully most of you are familiar with that. But be careful not to be in the trap of just keeping on adding elements as you're thinking to build up the tension here. So we're starting in this build area. Don't just keep adding things to achieve that. Think about different moves. Make sure you understand what is playing in here and what happens when we take something out from that group and put something back in. That's good enough for what happens so far here. There is no automation across this track. There is no special elements added to create more tension and drama. Okay, so the next thing I would say is very often we use volume and filters for automation. So again, starting basic, if we use volume and filter automation, we can add and subtract energy, okay? So the most basic of that would be, if we look at this top loop here, we could go over to our audio effects category, and we could grab ourselves. By the way, as I said, it's going to be very beginner friendly today, and then we're going to ramp it up as we go. So over on the top loop here, we're just going to add a utility. Massive tip as well, ladies and gents, don't automate the volume fader itself. This here, either on the session view, we don't automate that, or here in the arrangement view, as that will lead you into problems later when you're trying to mix your track and you want to bring all your levels up and down. You're just going to have your automation be able and disabled, right? We don't really want that. Capers again, should there be multiple levels to the tension and release? Great question. You have two cursors. That's very interesting. Is that still happening? Maybe you can let me know if you see that. Strange. I don't see two cursors this end, so I don't know what causes that. That's a comment from Capers. Should there be multiple levers to the tension release? I believe so. The better you get at doing this, the more you can make your viewers really create that anticipation and create the feeling you want them. You're pointing them in to feel a certain way, or, you know, make the dance floor move a certain way. So the better you are at that, the better this is going to work. We're going to have multiple layers, so you're going to see that in a second. Great question. Keep that thoughts with you, because you're going to see that in action. So volume automation, utility. Click on the gain, turn on automation so we can see it. And what we could do just simply here in the build is we could kind of very simply sweep that volume down as a way to sort of take it out before the end of the build happens. So in this case, we're reducing the energy of that particular top loop. We'll leave a few things out so that we can kind of hear this, and then we'll put everything back in. So it's just going to slowly sweep away. So that's a very basic move. I'm sure many of you and most of you understand volume automation is a simple way to create energy changes where we just kind of lower and raise things. Now, it's a bit of a classic move to actually do a little bit more advanced with that, where again, what you might actually do is go to the master track, put a utility here. And what you might do in that case is actually take the gain of the whole track up and down in the main break. So you might open up the master track here, and you might actually turn everything up in the chorus or the drop, and then bring it down again. So that's again a classic old school trick, is to play around a lot with volume changes where you raise and lower. And of course, think about a little bit, if we want an impact, then louder is generally going to be seen as better than quieter, right? So when I make things quieter, I'm trying to sort of reduce the tension. And when I'm turning things up, I'm trying to build it. That should be pretty logical. Why I've banged on about volume first, again, as I said, I'm sure many of you are aware of how to do that, and you automate the gain of a utility, is that over time that I've been doing this, I use volume automation not too often, because I feel like it's actually, you know, a fairly simple form of automation. I think sometimes just for very basic sweeping things in and out or turning things up and down, it's fair to work with it. But I think a stronger move actually, which I learned over time, is to grab the filter. So we can do something similar here. What we should do is 2 examples of it, just checking the chat again. The cursors are a YouTube feature. Oh, okay, fair enough. I don't, as I said, I'm sorry, I would have to figure that out. But for now, if there's 2 cursors, my apologies if it's in the way. But yep, I don't see that on my end. So as I said, sorry about that. If someone knows how to stop the 2 cursors, simply let me know. But yep, not aware of that one this end. All right, so let's do a quick shootout here between a volume automation of what we were just showing, what I was just showing you there. So let's turn the utility on, gain, and let's just use it. And let's do it in the break actually here. So we're going to jump for a second to volume automation of the drop. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sweep it down and then bring it back up a little bit with volume, okay, on this top loop here. So let's have a listen to what that sounds like, and then we'll play with the filter next so we can check it out. Just go back there. Okay, utility, gain, let's get that automatically working for us. And I realized, by the way, I'm doing this on the master track. Doesn't really matter. Or am I? No, actually, sorry, beg your pardon. It's working perfectly. And in context, let's have that with a few things. So we're just creating very simple sweeping this top loop down and out with a utility gain. And it does the business. But the point for me is that actually over time, like I was trying to explain a little bit, is that with a filter, we could also sweep this top loop away and bring it back, but we're doing it with frequency and it's not volume. And so if you're really digging into the technical side of things and the science of things, you'll find when you're sweeping frequency out, almost removing the sound and bringing it back with a filter, it sounds different and it's more impactful in the mixing and it's more impactful overall in your track. So as I said, I use utility and volume automation for the very, very basics, little ramps, little things. I do find in a lot of beginners tracks, there's a lot of this as we're learning and we're not sure what else to do yet. We do a lot of volume automation. So maybe as the first step, if you're a beginner and you're starting with the basic steps of some of this, try what I'm about to do next and go for a filter instead for some of the ramps you're trying to do, bringing in a sound, taking it away, and feel that out and understand what that sounds like in comparison. So if we duplicate this top track down, which is what I was thinking to do, and then we're going to remove on one of these copies here. So let's make the white one the new demo track. We're going to remove that utility or delete the automation will do. So let's do that. Put it down there. We'll just clear that envelope, get rid of that. I was looking for that plus before. Let's have that up here. Great. So now on the second copy, let's turn that one off. And now what we're going to do is turn our filter on. Also, I would suggest doing this with the utility. I would also always automate the on and off of the device, because again, that's another trick that I see a lot of people trap that they fall into, which is where they don't do the on off first. And then what ends up happening is actually the filter's on across the whole top loop in this case, right through the track, and that might be changing how it sounds and you didn't actually want that to happen. So take control of it as well, where you turn it on and off. That will give you much more control, like I said, to do what you're wanting to do. So we're going to grab the frequency, pop it down here, and we're going to do something simple, just like from high frequency down and then sweep it back up. So we're building some tension and release just in this hi-hat loop, right? So if we're checking it in solo, we can kind of hear it's pretty much all the way out, right? So I need to adjust that. Just fair enough. So we'll sort of dial it in to taste a bit here. And then we're going to do a shootout against volume. But the thing is with the filter, I've got a lot more things I can adjust as well. So it's not only just purely that this is a tip that I'm sharing. So that sounds quite natural. It's also the fact that we could go over to the filter and we could say, okay, we want a 12 dB curve instead of 24, so it's a bit wider and a bit smoother. We could add a bit of resonance to this as we're doing it. We could also add an LFO, which will wobble it, or an envelope. So we've got a lot more scope here to take something that's a simple automation, just bright to dark, or removal of the sound, but we can also shape it a lot more. So if we now play it, we've got a little bit of resonance involved. So also I'm going to turn it off here and just on here. We've got drive. So we've got a lot more adjustability. If you look at our friend, the utility, it's just really about gain, right? So that's it. We could play with the panning and the gain, but it's not really designed to do a lot more. But this filter's giving me a lot more shaping of that sound, right? So if we put a few more things in with our top loop, building tension and release with it in this drop area. Have a last listen to it. Keep a few things out because I think if we get too busy, you won't really hear it. So that's the reason for taking lots of stuff out. So now we're going to switch to the utility of the gain. For fairness, let's bring it over here a bit so that it's more or less matching the shape, like where it drops and where it comes back. Let's adjust it a little bit. So it sweeps it out and brings it back up. That's volume. Again, shoot out. So Capers has said the volume automation is subtle for me. That's a fair call, absolutely. And if you want subtle automation, by all means, just a little bit of volume will do that, right? But I think stacking these two side by side, like I said, over time, I could say I use a lot more filters all over my track to control these sort of sweeping out, taking things out and bringing them back like we're doing here with this example versus doing that with volume. That's the main point I'm trying to make. You'll find also when you talk to sort of mixing engineers and mastering, those volume moves where you take things in and out with the volume instead of frequency, they just tend to be a bit weaker overall, whereas this can be more punchy. Like I said, we're not actually we're not changing the level of that track, we're changing the frequency. We're sweeping away frequency and bringing it back. We're removing harmonics. We're not just turning it up or turning it down, and that's quite different. And as you can see, there's quite a lot more functions that I can do in my filter to make it a more dynamic also removal of that sound. So that's the very first tip here today with builds and drops. And it's also, like, as I said, literally across almost all my tracks, I'm doing this to control that tension and release. So the very first, most basic build and drop tool we've got is automating volume and filters, both sections. So in the build, we could be opening up things, and in the drop, we could be reducing things and then opening them up or just reducing them, all of those things. So again, the actual drop itself is its own little story where we can really bring things in and out quite a lot. So when I get stuck into this track in a little bit, I will be doing what we just did right across lots of the tracks, particularly in the drop area, right? So the very first, most basic building tension and release tools, automation, volume, filters, both either or, go your hardest. My tip is play around with filters, as you can see, as they have interesting characteristics that separate them from just doing volume. They stand up really good in a mix overall, and we've got more things to play with. Okay, what about next? What could we also do in some of these areas of the track? So we're going to remove that top loop, the double up. We're going to put the other one back. We're going to take away the utility from it. We're going to leave the filter there just switched off because I'll probably use that in a moment to dial that in how I actually want it for the track. Let's make our track busy. So all the stems like so. And let's come into the build area. So let's again strip things down a bit, play around with our MIDI controller, because what we did earlier with the DJ filter on the master track, that is, you know, live performing thinking like we're a DJ here, sweeping that filter around. Well, similarly, we can live perform some other things here just to get a feel for, again, what they add or remove. So if we're trying to build engine energy here and anticipation in the build section, what happens if we just pick a couple of sounds and we sort of mess around with the sends and returns a little bit? So let's just set this up. So we want to sort of bring in our track a little bit and get a little bit more open so we can kind of see these. Let's get over to the mix page. Okay, so let me just check that I'm there. I am not yes yet. Okay, we could do it with the mouse anyway. So let's pick on this top track again. Now let's, again, we're going to need to just strip things down a bit so we can kind of get our ears around what's going on. The busier it is, the less you're going to hear these changes. So let's strip it down to just that percussion, the hats, and the top loop. And let's say we're playing through here and we grab the B send, which is currently going to the delay return track over here. So we've got a delay by default in Ableton on this B return, and we just start automating or sending some of that. So that's a great way to, again, automate some delay or reverb here. Let's try it with the reverb on the same loop. So if we're going through here and we just sweep our reverb a bit. We could have both. Okay, so I often use the send and returns and the B and A that's built into my set here. I haven't made any changes. I'm just working with a default Ableton Live session that I've built out this track idea, and so those are set up as they were. And again, we can grab those, we can turn on our automation, and we could start to add those. They're a great way for building tension in this build area, and we can release that tension by getting them out again when we arrive in the drop. Now, once again, you could do this a different way with your delays and reverbs. They could be, instead of the send and return workflow, of course, you could be working with your favorites and adding them to the track. So we could grab an echo and we could add it directly to the top loop, and we can switch it on and off and automate, again, the feedback and the wet and dry. So what I'd make a decision here is, there is a difference, again, like the utility and the filter. There's a choice here. If I use the send and return workflow, so the B, let's just say the delay for the moment, the B delay. If I use that, there's one advantage. It's the same delay across the whole track, right? So if I use the B send and the B return, my settings here, the amount of feedback, the fact that it's eighth dotted, that's the 2 3/16 here, it's 100% dry wet. That means if I use that B send and return workflow across my project, I've got a uniform delay happening, right? You might want that, and then again, you might want individual different delays, quarter delays, eighth delays, different amounts of feedback, different amounts of dry wet. That means if you do that, you're going to want to insert those effects, right, on the individual tracks. So again, choices, right? We're always spoilt with those. There's advantages of both. And there is one method in the middle that you can use as well, which is actually to set up more returns. So you can still use send and returns only. You build another return, a blank one, and you put your echo down on that. And you might set that. You do need to set the dry wet to 100% because it's a return track, but you might set the echo to quarters, and you might set the feedback to a different value, and you just write on this return, you know, that this is a quarter echo, and therefore, you know, we kind of know that we've set that up to do something else. So now we've got two different returns we could use across our track. So now we could go to the return C whenever we want that quarter delay, right? So we could have a listen to that. So we're going to the B, that's the eighth delay. Now we're going to send to the quarter. Right, or we could say do something fun here where we go back to eighths, unsync them. We put one side to quarter and one to eighth, so we've got a different delay in our left and right ear with, again, a bit more feedback. So let's try that. So really nice, right? Versus the conventional eighth delay return there. So like I said, there's a hybrid using the send and returns, creating more returns with different reverbs and different delays. If you want to do this, that's absolutely possible. Again, it can mean that you can use B delay when you want that, C delay when you want this, or going directly into the track itself, adding an insert effect and working with that. So hopefully that's covered that quite well. Just going to have a look in the chat here. I have not been ignoring it, but I haven't sort of answered a little bit. Capers has been busy. The volume automation is subtle. We did see that before. Find the filter automation more interesting because multiple things are happening at the same time. Exactly. And it's also more powerful in your mix. Like I said, it will stand up a lot more. Really play with it. If it's new to you, it might take you a moment, but you'll find just sweeping frequency, and you can bring a sound out completely. We'll do it shortly with the filter where it virtually disappears to silence, and then we bring it back, but we've got a lot more, energy behind that move as well. A2K77, good afternoon. Haven't seen you for a little bit, but good to see you here. For the build-ups, I actually created a rack that emulates third-party VSTs like Endless Smile. Amazing. That's a pretty cool thing. Again, a lot of guys and girls are using Endless Smile right on the master track, and again, automating that to do massive builds. If you're writing music where, you want a huge build and impact, yes, Endless Smile, I've seen plenty of people working with that one, like Chris Lakes and those kind of, big, powerful main stage kind of tracks. I don't quite have that idea here. It's more stripped down, but that's kind of helpful in a way because we're just kind of doing the basics rather than trying to make, a huge, massive, I don't know, festival style drop at this point in time. We're going through the basics. So that covers, like, again, we're going to make examples of all these in a moment. Like, we're going to actually make this build and drop work well. But so we've so far looked at automating volumes and filters. Now we've looked at delays and reverbs. I've written FX there. Literally, again, we could use any of our favorite effects to kind of create simile tension and release. So, if you're here in the chat and you're an Ableton Live user, you might throw me in an effect, say, what happens if I use the redux? Could that work? Or something else, or the raw or overdrive, or something else in there, the filter delay. Can we use some of those? Yes. So you can even also start to work with the basics of tension and release building with volume and filters. Then we go delay, reverb. There's simple sort of effects and parameters that are always kind of here and gives us the basics. And then we could start saying, okay, we're a bit bored with that. What's next? So there's lots and lots of kind of like, things you could do to experiment with automating other effects to build tension or take it away, right? Adrian Dantas, hey Heath, long time no see. Great to have you here. Good afternoon to you. And to be honest, yes, it's actually, I'm just going to have a sip of water. It's pretty warm here. So I'm just going to have a sip of water. Feel free to drop something in the chat if you wish. Actually, to be honest, I only got into the live stream. This is the first time for this month, as it's been a very busy month with music and DJing and all those good things. And hopefully in September and looking towards the end of the year, we can get back to a couple per month. It's just been a very busy month. But in between, do make sure I do videos as well. So if I haven't been live, there's certainly been a couple of videos I've added all about Ableton Live and pigments and various things to do with electronic music on my channel. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is noise. Now, I've got a loop down here in this track. So again, if we just kind of familiarize ourselves a little bit with the track for a second. So let's just close everything up. We'll do that this way. There we go. So let's say we pop everything back in. We can also do that quicker way. Okay, so let's pop everything back in, and we're going to check this purple track out here in a second, which is called labeled noise. It's just an audio source of noise, so it's like an audio loop from a sample pack, I would imagine. And then we're going to take a look at that and what it sounds like, what difference it makes when it's in the track and when it's out. Okay, so again, looking at the build side of things, building tension, drama, creating anticipation, exaggerating energy, adding and remove, larger, smaller. We'll get stuck into some of those other things there, but the noise, okay? And not just, this could be virtually anything. At the moment, it's, as I said, an audio loop that sort of has a bit of noise. So let's have a listen to it. And get a feel for what it is. And let's switch anything off that's on down here. And let's also maybe get a utility and we'll turn it up a bit louder, or we can do it in the clip volume. So let's just have a listen. So by itself, it's a little bit more interesting than just a flat line of noise. It's got a little bit of character to it, but it's not doing too much. And so, when it comes to sort of another thing we can do to build tension and release, we can add these little layers like, again, sort of, I'm sure many of you are aware of sort of rises and sweeps and white noise, and we can make them very quickly. We might do an example ourselves in a second just to have a comparison. But the thing that you can do with these is a lot to make them more interesting than just static noise. So here we're working with audio. Let's have a listen to it with what I'd done previously, which was just I added an EQ just to cut any low end that we didn't need. It's not really a lot, but I did have a kickstart here, and that kickstart is doing quite a bit, I would say, in a second when we switch this on, and I'll break down what that is doing. And so that is sidechain currently to the kick up here, this kick with this envelope. And so it's got a nice bit of pumping and movement from that, which is helping it quite a bit. So that makes it a bit more interesting, but at the moment it doesn't really necessarily build tension or release on it, right? It just kind of makes it move a little bit. And I think if you do noise layers in your track, get them moving through a variety of things, filters, panning, things that modulate it and move it. So if we make a sound in a second, we're going to make it and we're going to build it in layers so that it's more and more interesting, and it's not just a static bit of noise. It's got something about it that makes it more part of the track rather than just a piece of noise slid under there. And I think if you make your own, you'll tend to find that you, again, a bit like the filter utility before, you'll have a lot more control over what it does. So let's look at seeing how we could sort of build a bit more tension and release with this noise layer, just as it is. So we're going to turn it down a bit, back to where it was, volume-wise. Take that kick away. And let's put it with a few things so we can just get context again. So again, we're going to add a filter to this. First move. And we could do low cuts or high cuts. Let's try low cut. So So because it's mainly high frequency up here, which we can kind of see, we're going to be much better with the low pass or high cuts. And what we can do is, again, we're going to automate this filter a little bit, just to build, again, a bit of tension here. So we're going to take control of the on-off button first, put that down the bottom here, so we can kind of decide where we want to use it. For now, in this area here. If I want it over here, then I can, do that in a second. I can turn on my pencil and put it here, right? So this is a habit of mine. I suggest it's a good habit to get into. Automate your on-off button, because it means that it's not over here working, and maybe you left the frequency down here and you forget about it, and suddenly, yep, you're in trouble. So keep an eye out for that one. Take an automation of the on-off, and that won't happen. Next, we're going to take the frequency. So back to before, in this case, I'm using again my filter, not to remove the sound this time, to build a bit of energy. And this would be a fantastic one to bring in my MIDI controller as well, and I can record that automation of that frequency cutoff of this particular track. And I could make all those things work really, really well. So, sorry, I just lost the solo there. So it could be ebbing and flowing in this area here, but right for now I just want that simple, nice bit of tension where it's sweeping away. So again, that can be very subtle. And we've got all sorts of fun stuff. So just even drawing in with the automation, we can click in lots of points. We could record it with our MIDI controller and make it really organically move. That could be really nice across this whole noise, that it ebbs and flows and it moves just through the filter cutoff. Again, the filter's giving me lots of choices, so I could boost the resonance. I can have the 12 dB filter. It was really subtle before in the mix. It's still subtle, but now it's doing something. Doing its own thing. And if I put an LFO on it in a moment, using still tools that we have in the filter here, we can make it more moving around. So let's say in a second we now put an LFO on the cutoff as well. Make it note synced. So I'm trying to exaggerate that a bit, so it's a bit obvious that you can hear the LFO. So if I bring this down a bit more, or solo it. Changing the waveforms, random is quite nice because it's really randomly opening and closing that LFO. So these are the secrets to getting like noise layers a little bit more interesting in your tracks. Make them move, make them pan, make them not be static, make them sidechain to your kick drum, make them pan left and right, make them morph up and down. This filter's opening and closing from dark to bright. And if you add the LFO to it, we don't have to have the LFO, but it's adding some sort of bounce and movement to it as well. So if we want more drama there, as you can hear, it's more static, just sweeping in and out. Still cool. But if we want more drama, we can create that. Strong wobble or a more sort of slower quarter note wobble here. We could also use different filter types. That would be interesting. So we could try a comb. But it's not going to probably be as strong on this sound as it is just in the end a little bit of noise. But if we made our own riser, it could be very interesting. But we could, the resampling will be interesting. So I like the random sample and hold here because, as I said, it's kind of doing its own. Wander could also be nice. But I think my favorite sample and hold here, just for that feeling. And again, I've made it exaggerated, so I'd make it a bit more subtle. But it's now got movement. And if we take the noise out from the mix, there's a hole there. That's the main thing to notice here. So I've removed it. If we put it back in, it makes a big difference, right? It's really playing a role in there. So again, filter, very basics, might use it just to sweep that sound in and out. Could record it with a MIDI controller for lots of beautiful organic movement of this filter, sweeping it in and out. Could add an LFO for a little bit of wobble. We could go and get our auto pan and put it on here and sweep it around our heads left to right. So I just want you to think about, you know, again, if we're trying to build drama and tension in this area here, these are a lot of the tools we can use to do that. So most of any noise in my track doesn't stand still. It's kind of like an interesting layer. It belongs there, and it's going to, in this area, if I want, build some tension and drama. So even just sweeping it in and out is potentially guiding you to what I want it to do, what role I want it to play in this area. So again, we're going to do that in the second hour here. I'm just going to work my way through and make all these things come together. For now, I'm just sort of walking you through a few of the basics and what we can think about, what we could do. So again, I'm going to remove that for now. I'll do it from scratch in a second. I think that's better with the conscious decision to, as I said, make the difference in that area, build the drama and the tension. So we've looked at filters and volumes and automating them. Automating delay and reverb using the send and returns or using inserts, getting some noise in this area, whether it's an audio loop or whether it's a synth that we make a drone or our own sounds here. We could really benefit from that in terms of building a drama. But again, don't add it there. If you're just adding more and more stuff, it doesn't really bring anything to the table. That was the reason I was just taking that in and out, because I need to check that it's belongs there. If I don't hear a difference, I'm not going to have it there. Don't just add it for the sake of it. And the same actually, by the way, when we're talking about that breaks in your track, when you have a break or a drop, you don't have to have any drops in your track, right? You don't have to have any breaks in your track. I find some people sometimes they just add breaks without really thinking, what is the purpose of it? What purpose does it serve? You know, if you want to answer that question in the chat, if you want to answer what purpose does a break serve, pop it in the chat. But you don't have to have breaks in your tracks or big drops. If you put a drop or a break in there, it's serving a purpose and you want it to execute that purpose. Don't just put it there because you think you have to, because Chris Lake does or Fisher does or something like that. Put it there because you understand what it's going to do. And in our case here, it's the contrast to what we're doing to the left. It's the build and the drop. The build, it's the contrast to that. So where we choose to put it and what we want it to do, they're conscious decisions. Don't just be caught, as I said, adding them without really thinking about that. What else could we add in our build section? So hopefully the basics are helpful, because as you can see, we don't need too much at all so far. We're just using effects tools that are already close to hand, and we could do quite a lot with that. Same as, like I pointed out earlier, this track is arranged with just the parts to give the feeling of tension and release already. And if you're good at that, I can listen to your track and say, you are already guiding me where to feel this, and where is the drop, where is the build, where is the payoff. If you can do that, then this is just an extra on top of it, right? So work on that, make a big difference. We've looked at noise and what happens if we modulate it a bit. So what else could we layer in our build up area to create tension and drama? What are some classic things people do in this area here to do that? Any clues? Just going to have a look at the stream chat here. It's been a little bit busier. Just got to go back and look here. If busy means big dollars for you, then we are more happy to wait. So let's see, are we indeed back? We might be back. Maybe if someone can let me know. I think we are back online. It's going to pick up from where I left off. If we are, that was very interesting. A little bit of a technical hitch there. Someone can confirm. Yeah, great. Thank you, Adrian. That's awesome. Yeah, very strange. Bit of a technical hitch this end. Haven't had that one before, so had to troubleshoot that one. All right, so let's pick up where we were and try to get myself back on track here. So what I'm going to do actually just quickly, I don't think I've changed anything too much that I need to save, so I think we're probably okay. So we were talking about the noises, right? Modulating noise, making sure that if we've got those layers as well, they're a little bit more interesting than just sort of static noise. I proposed a question about, did anyone know of some other things that I haven't shown so far that we could add in the build-up section to create more energy, to exaggerate energy, to build more tension and drama? Because I can think of some more moves that I haven't used yet that could well work in those areas. So if you can think of any, let me know. And while we're sort of thinking about that, let me just start then working with what we've got and just kind of building some anticipation and a little bit more drama in this area of the build first. So Adrian Dantas has commented exaggerated reverb. That could definitely work. So you might have just come in slightly after I sort of went over reverb and delay, I think, Adrian, but that's a great call. Absolutely. It's more a little bit like, so I was commenting before about not adding sort of things as your go-to move to create the drama and tension, but I am actually now talking about perhaps adding something that isn't here, that is a classic move again in this area. There's certain classic sort of things. I'm sure the noise sweeps and rises and things everyone's very aware of. Change the rhythm of the drums, play double time. Yeah, I mean, that's a very creative one. I'll cut to the chase. I kind of wrote it in this little clip over here, fills and rolls. So let's say what isn't here in this track is a big snare roll, right? So aside from your key elements of the track, the main instruments and sounds, and a noise, which is to do a lot with tension and release, that noise layer that I have here. Another classic move is obviously drum fills, snare rolls, some sort of fills and percussion perhaps, or additional adding in this case, yes, but adding some sort of tension from that, right? So if I'm listening to this section, I could hear here where if I did want to sort of, it hasn't happened in the track yet, I could build some new tension by having a little fill or a roll here. And I'm not going to go for a snare roll here. I'm going to go for something else. So let's sort of go into the samples. Fingers crossed I don't have to go out and come back in, but that was a very strange message I received, one I've never seen before, about OBS, interestingly enough. that it was using 40 gigs or something of resources. So if anyone's an OBS whiz, let me know in the chat. So what I'm hearing here is maybe like some little clap fills. So I'm going to go for a classic 909 clap sounds here, dropping it onto a MIDI track. Now let's just program in some little claps here that happen. And that will just be a little bit more drama here. And I'm not breaking my own rules. I am adding something, but as I said, it's again a classic move. And if you can kind of hear space and you've created space, then in this case, we could have some nice little clap fills. So let's maybe have something. We'll start with it nice and simple, and let's make a ramp of just something like that. And then how frequent these happen and the timing of them, we're going to check in a moment where they happen. Pretty much exactly like that. And what we could do in that second one there is vary that up a little bit and have a nice intro clap, and then the following it up with the answer to that. So the clap lands and then we get the answer with the fill. Just like that. So we sort of customize this as we go a little bit. The rhythm of the fills. Hang on. Yeah, I'm going to put that on the 1 here. Maybe 1 back. So something like that to add a nice little addition of building some drama and tension here. And then in this second phrase, so we've got 16 bars here. So Adrian Dante's exaggerated reverb, capers, change the rhythm of the drums, play double time, add more call and response. All good. Obviously, you know, we can all be creative here as well, and you can go with what feels right to you. It was just sort of hearing something here where I could add something. And of course, as I said, to go with noise, rises, sweeps, rolls, fills are good ways to, again, build drama and energy. And also reversing sounds is one of my favorite. But again, this doesn't have to be a clap. I thought this sounded quite nice with a clap. We could do this with vocals, percussion. Be creative, you know, don't always do the same thing. I just think this current music idea suits quite nicely and ideally with a sort of traditional techno clap kind of 909 clap idea. So in the second phrase here, the second 8 bars, let's consolidate those claps together into one clip. And then let's use Adrian's idea a bit of like, let's add some big splashy reverb to that. So it's going to be different in the second 8 bars. And we could do that by automating our A return send combination here. So in the second section, let's kind of whack on a big pile of reverb. We'll adjust that, but it will change then. The first is very dry, and we could even have a little bit of reverb on the first area. But maybe we'll leave them dry. Right, and then on this last one, so I'm just giving you ideas here, but I'm sure you're already off and running again with creativity. And it could be nice to do this with the send and return again, as long as you're happy with the setup of this reverb, because if I start adjusting that and I've got it elsewhere in my track, of course I'm affecting all the other tracks that I might have send to this return. So generally I wouldn't do that. Again, I would make another return if I want a different reverb, or I would place it directly behind the clap here to get the result. So with this last clap here, let's go wild. Let's have the delay on that into here. So the B send, right, which was my 8th delay, could even use the quarter one, and let's just have it in here like so, somewhere in here, a bit closer to the clap itself. So a little bit fussy there, but let's bring it right in. Okay, so that should delay into the drop. And we might have the reverb as well. So there's an example of something that I want to change. So I like that, but it's not long enough for me. So just like I was speaking about a second ago with this B return, this B delay, I'm not going to adjust that, but I want a longer delay and a more customized one. So I'm going to, in this case, put it right behind the clap. So we're going to clear the browser. We're going to grab ourselves the echo, put it in behind here, and we're going to essentially use this to make our own little delay here. It's going to go a lot longer into the break, because I think that's quite nice. So we're going to turn it on there. Again, we might be turning it off somewhere over here, but now we take control of that first up. We're going to have more feedback, and we don't need to have 100% wet as it's not a return track. So let's have a listen, see what we're building here. So again, more options. I can unsync it, make it 1/8 quarter, one of my favorite things to do. We could also have ping pong 1/8, but that'll spread it around our heads a bit. Let's take the dry wet, and we're just going to also have that a little bit adjusted. So 70 when it comes on, and then we're going to bring it sweeping down a little bit. Something like that. So now I'm just going to level the claps out a bit to the right level. Nice. So that was a little quick example of a simple clap pattern with a 909 clap, and a little bit of a change between both sections. I would say that's a really good move. So we've got in the first section dry and these little fills that are happening. Then in the second section, we've automated with two different things. We've added an echo to get the exact echo we wanted to happen with the last notes, because the send and return workflow wasn't quite what I was looking for. But we've also got the mixer automated on the return of the reverb return to make those first few fills kind of add much more drama and tension. So over this, 16 bars now, the build does have a new level of tension to it. We've made a little bit more drama. So nice to have that little echo of those last claps going in. By the way, if there's any issues with the stream, do let me know. Again, hopefully we're all good and we're back and we're stable and happy days. So might as well just have a last little look at something you can do that's more in the advanced category of making your builds and drops work really well. And that's a little bit to do more with kind of the musical side of things. And that is to sort of like deliberately write sort of melodies or parts of your musical notes to make them sort of hang in a tense way, make them rub a little bit, make them feel like they're not resolved. So what am I sort of meaning there? So Adrian Dantas, no problems with the stream. Amazing. Good to hear. As I said, very strange happening. So I hope it doesn't happen again before we're done for today. So what I'm talking about there a little bit when it comes to music is let's just do something a little bit simple here. At the end of the build, and let's sort of say, can we do it with what we have? I guess we can try that. So we can bring this clip in here. See if we can modify what we've got. And if not, we'll write something new. Okay. So what I'm sort of talking about is I'm drawn to this track with the pattern chords. They're actually removed from this area, so we're just using it as an example. But what you can do, as I said, in a more advanced way is thinking about ways to write, as I said, your musical parts, basses, melodies, chords, chord progressions, and changing what they do at the very end of that progression or at the very end of the phrase, right? We're talking a bit about phrases here. You know, so at the very end of this chord progression that I've got in this track, we are here with this final chord here. And that chord happens to be, let me check, we're in A major, and it happens to be the second chord of the scale, right? So it's not the root, it's the second chord of the scale. And to look at it, it's a minor chord. Okay. So we're moving in the very end here to actually a bit of a tense chord in the two. And if it doesn't loop back around to the root chord, the A, then we kind of leave people hanging, right? So if this chord is here and there's nothing coming after it, and we go into this space here, just with the music and the chord, it sort of will leave things feeling a bit tense. Whereas if it loops again around, it will probably feel like it goes from tense back to sort of home base, which is kind of what's happening. So let's listen to it this way. So it resolves in that chord progression when we bring the first chord of the chord progression back in, because it's sort of looping around right back to the start of the loop of the chords. If we don't have that, we're leaving tension. So this is kind of a good move if we had this here, because it's unresolved. It doesn't go back to a feeling of resolved. It actually leaves us hanging on chord 2, a minor chord, another chord. So chord 2 doesn't generally resolve a chord progression, is what I'm trying to say. We're getting deeper into music theories here, but chord 2 is not resolving a chord progression. Chord 1 is home base. So if we're going back there, things are going to feel nice and comfy and we're returning home. But if we go away from home base and we leave ourselves away from home base, it's actually called cadence. And there are different types of cadences we can do. We can leave things very, very tense. And another chord we could do here would be the 7th. So if we actually go to the G sharp down there, and I'll just make sure play, skip, plays, skip, plays. So that should still work fine. That is another tense chord, the 7. Wants to go back to the 1. If it doesn't go back to the 1, it's going to leave you feeling kind of tense and unresolved. So that's a great way musically to build tension, because again, if I resolve it with the 1, it's going to feel again that we went away from home but we returned to home. So if you get good with the music theory, again, feels nice, it resolves, right? So you can play around with that a lot. If you're not going to resolve the final chord back to home base, like I said, back to the 1, 7 wants to go to the 1, 5 wants to go to the 1, 2 might go elsewhere than the 1, but eventually it wants to get back there. We can really use the tension there. Using the chords to increase tension too, says Capers, absolutely. So we can really do a lot with the music as well. It's more of an advanced thing. I think I would run out of time today to just do a deep dive on that. But again, hopefully it just gives you a bit of thought or some thinking that I can build that drama and tension also with music. So you can write your music to execute something in this space by making, as I said, chords that don't resolve, doing descending chords. So let's go backwards a bit here. Let's go right back, just so I don't lose my place. That's where I was there. So what we could also do here is, that was a fairly musical theory based concept. Leave the last chord not resolving, find out which chords in your progression or scale are the ones that need to go back to home base, and then finish on those chords going into the drop. They're going to leave you hanging. So next up, if we go in here, one of my favorite things to do might be to modify this a little bit. So in that case, what do I mean? Well, I might rewrite this last chord here a little bit. So I might, let's bring it in like so. And then what I might do is make it, one of my favorite moves might be to make it chromatically move downwards. So I sweep it down through notes in the scale. So maybe something like that. If it was a melody, it would just be the 3 notes. So we could even go one more there, I can hear as well, right, chromatically. Right, so that's one of my most favorite moves again, and you could do that with the chords, the melody or the bass. We write this descending progression. It can also be ascending, but ascending might be a bit more happy feeling, and descending like this might be a little, give you a bit more, a nice sort of moody feeling of, again, some drama if you're looking for drama. So let's build the triads here and make them descending chords. Nice, right? And if we take this, maybe we do split here, turn this into a big long hanging chord. Again, a bit like we just delayed that last note of the claps, the last claps. Maybe we do this into the drop. Slowly fading away, right? So I'd automate that so that sweeps really nicely down and in. So there's little ways we can change the music. Adrian Dantas, what about doing the same with the melody? 100%. To Capers and Adrian Dantas descending chords trick. It's simple and effective. Yeah, I love it. It's one of my favorite. And as I said, we can go ascending to build the drama and tension. Again, I'm not going to tell you right or wrong. There is no such thing, as we know often with music. It's about being creative here, but you can also try ascending rather than descending, right? But it could be a really good payoff to write your own little sections that build that drama and tension at the end of the build, at the end of the drop, right? It's a nice way to have something that signals, again, the end of the phrase, and it signals something unique, and it builds some tension and drama. You're pointing your listener or your dancer or your people that are listening to the track, you're pointing them where you want them to go. So that's a little touch on unresolved melodies, chords, like leaving people hanging by choosing a special chord or special notes in the melody that are the ones that need to go home. And if you're not sure what they are, I'm sure there's a lot. I'd love to deep dive on that, but like I said, it would take up the rest of what we've got today in the video just to go through that. That's music theory. But if you understand where generally which intervals of the chords and notes of the scale you're working in, where they want to go, where does the 2 normally like to go? Does it go to the 3 or the 5, or does it like to go to the 1? The 7 likes to return to the 1. The 5 likes to go to the 1. The 4 and 6, they can go back to the 1 as well. It's sort of figuring that out, and then you can say, great, I'm going to leave the people hanging on that chord deliberately. We're not going to make it nice and comfortable that it goes back home. We can go descending, ascending, and build some nice tension and drama. That another favorite move of mine in the drop here now. So into the break, we've got the full chords over here. Let's see if we can line them up a bit. I think we possibly make that change here. Let's just see if this kind of works without, or I could actually split it and make it, consolidate it. So we might just do that. Just make this one clip. Let's give it another color. Let's just pop in. We'll just bring them a little over to there. All right, let's have a listen to that. Nice. So looking at the chords, another little chess move. Early on in the intro of the track, or when you first bring in the chords, or somewhere like this in the drop, where we're maybe wanting to remove some energy. So here we're trying to build up anticipation and drama. Here we might want to take it away a bit. So maybe in all of these chords over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the 3rd interval, this interval here. So I'm going to make my chords actually, for the last 2, they're going to be diatonic chords, just the 2 notes only. And here we've got a triad, but we're removing the emotional layer of that triad, which is the 3rd. So these are stripped down chords, and they'll sound a lot more neutral than they did a moment ago. So what I'd love to do if that break was double the length is I would strip the center out, the 3rds of those chords, the note that gives the emotion to the triads, especially in these 2 triads here. That's the key note that gives the feeling. The middle 3rd of triads is, again, music theory. That note there is what decides if it's a major, minor, and the emotion of it. So by stripping them down, you can work between full chords and reduced chords, and it's a great way, again, to make your chord progression interesting over the track in the intros and sections of the track where you don't reveal yet the full chords. It's a really nice trick and a technique to use. So maybe we don't do that and we go back to what we had. I think I'd want double the length. So while I'm working with just the 16 bars, I'm going to put them like that. But I am going to go for ascending over here. Maybe not that high, so let's just play with it a bit. So I've stripped the chords, maybe even I just make it a melody here. Right, so reworking these sections for drama, big payoff for me, big payoff, right? At either end of the build and the drop, we're getting really nice, its own unique little sequences, and I'm just playing around with chords in the scale, ascending, descending. They don't have to be chords, they could be chords, it could be a melody. You can see you could mess around with a lot. We could do sound design as well, we could bend those, and I think at the very last one here we'd pull it out as well, so again it would drift into the side. There would be silence in here, we would drift and carve that space out before it drops on the other side, right? So I think that kind of works for, you know, a nice little change. I didn't have the chords here before in this area, but they can be there in the build if we want. I think they were out before. Maybe we could try even just taking them out until we've got the descending part. So I do really like this long note in the start that actually came out left over from that. I really like that a lot. But I think if I was using that descending, I'd have that in the arrangement. But I'm going to take it out. But that's still, the concept works. I think this track benefits from the pads not being there in this particular track, but there's plenty of times where I'll use that descending at the very end. And by the way, you can kind of, this is a 16 bar sort of drop that we're working on here. A lot of tracks, they'll have, you know, at the very end somewhere here, they have what's called like, you know, a pre-chorus or a pre-drop. So you could even split this into two, and you can start, your build might have started from here actually all the way up to somewhere there, and then you might take that downwards a little bit in energy leading into the drop. So again, that might depend on the track, the genre, all of those good things. There's no rule book, right? So your build can start a lot earlier. And you might have what's called a pre-chorus or a pre-drop, where you sort of bring things sweeping down and into the drop. What I do try and concentrate myself in my own music is to make this sort of segue between the end of the build and the beginning of the drop kind of smooth. Some tracks you could get them to work where it's abrupt and they happen, bang, and it's all happens. But generally I try to have a little bit of carryover of the energy from the end of the build in this area here, in that transition, to make it nice and smooth. But again, track by track, you might make it really abrupt and it might just be delays like that clap going into that space, or it might be, you know, a pre-drop where I added that marker in all of that area there. You actually work at sweeping it down into the drop. So you're sort of, again, you're guiding the listener and the dancer down into your drop. Now you can do that many ways. We could be sweeping filters down. We can be descending our music downwards into that space, right? We're kind of guiding someone there. So pre-choruses, pre-drops, they are a thing. And again, your build can be all the way out here. There's tracks where the snare roll goes for 32 bars or something like that, where it's a very long build. So it depends a lot on what you're trying to execute. So let's have a listen through. I think the drop with the chords in it and this last little bit I was doing, I think it works. Okay, one thing here. So also I'm going to show you another thing that we could add here if we want more drama, we are adding. But again, I'm doing it in a way where I can understand that it can be added, okay? Remember that we can take things away if we had too much here. We don't have too much. It was already very minimal. It was the track I pulled out to demonstrate this with the little idea that was collecting on my hard drive. So clap, fill, clap, roll, clap, fill. We're just going to label that track. So in here, we could have one little bit of music because the noise is good. It's working, but it's very kind of like in the background with all the percussion. So if you're not sort of noticing it, this might be more noticeable for some of you out there. We're going to add a little bit of music here. And let's just put our note on A, the root, make it legato. We don't need that many bars, or we're going to make it a long. And then let's see if we can find something that we could use. Either a sample or a preset we're looking for, the right sort of sound. Let's put a high string across here. See what that sounds like. Just checking the chat. What about using a flanger or chorus to link the sections? Flanger or chorus. Any effects you like. Flanger is going to give you the wobble and sweeping movement of a delay, and chorus is more going to give you like stereo width. So absolutely you can automate those effects and bring them in and out capers, but again, they're not sort of manufacturing too much drama. They're both the ones you've mentioned there are really great, but they're more for giving you a little bit more movement. So we just want a sustained string. Let's see if we can find one in a synth. Okay, let's try that again. Problem with strings is sometimes, you know, the instruments VSTs trying to do that versus actually a sample is a bit of a struggle. So we're going to see if we can find a sample and we'll use it like as a... But again, they're synth strings. That'll do. That's exactly kind of what I'm looking for. Something like this. So what is this? Doesn't actually have a key listed. So let's maybe just turn the scale off. See if we can establish what it might be, the tuning of it. Okay, let's put a tuner behind it, see if we can just figure it out, just so we make it fit the music scale we're in, which happens to be A major here. Yeah, that's definitely not in key. I can hear that with my ear. Okay, so I've got a C4 there. Just get back to the start of the note. Maybe back where it was, I think. let's try just checking it again, string with my EQ. So probably should walk you through what I was achieving there. So the tuner didn't read the string sample here, which I've looped inside of the simpler. I'm not getting any key out of the file name. Tuner didn't pick it up. So what I was doing was using the EQ8, and I was looking at the sort of fundamental note, the lowest kind of frequency that I get on the EQ, and then looking to tune the simpler to that. And I can see a C3, C4 when I'm here. And my MIDI note is C3. So if I wanted, I could bring this the other way to match, right? So we're on a G3, we can come down a little bit further. 2 more semitones. So now it's a C3 matching a C3, right? And then what you can do is now you can move the notes into notes of the scale, and they'll be in tune, right? They'll be in tune with the key of the track. I'll loop it up smaller so we can make it smaller again. Something like that. I'm looking for a high string and a bit of drama. How high you want to go is up to you. I think A4 is pretty good. And what we learned earlier with the noise is it wouldn't remain like that for me static. So I hope you've understood kind of what I did with the tuning and how I've got that to work. So I've got a string that I know was playing a C3. My MIDI note was C3. It was tuned to a C3 in here using the EQ8 to help me figure that out. I've looped it up. I like where the sample is here. And now I'm just kind of pitching it up higher and higher, so it's a little like tense kind of layer again. I'd EQ it now, and I'd then again get it to kind of like modulate and move. So maybe what we could do here for a build, we could use a few tools up our sleeve. So one would be also to bend this note, right? So if we pop down into the envelopes or MPE even, we'll turn off scale for a second, grab the note, and let's have it over 16 bars, pitch itself down 7 semitones. So a bit like descending chords before, but this is going to be a descending string note, right? So you could go that way. It's going to go a bit far for my taste, so I'm going to take that away. What I could also do, listening to it, is actually go back down an octave and then go back to the MPE, pitch it up an octave. So instead of rising, we're going to rise, sorry, from down an octave lower to where I just was. So I'm building drama this way. It doesn't always have to be down. That doesn't always equal the answer, right? And by making it, I got a certain number of, yeah, I have, I think. Now let's just get the grid on and change it to a bigger grid as well, because that's just a bit too small, a bit fiddly. Okay, let's get this back under control there here. Okay, so now pitches up. So that's pretty interesting, right? It's a lot, you know, we're building our own little riser here out of a string. And I'm kind of hearing again something which could be interesting here is it rises to that at some point. Doesn't have to be right to the end of the phrase. And then we bring it all the way back down to home base, right at the end, sweep it back down. And again, if I'm sort of teaching you, if we are sound designing and making these layers from scratch, so we've got a nice string sample here, we've tuned it. Now we're making it rise up and rise down. Again, it's not going to stay static either. It's going to be, let's give it auto pan so we can sweep it around a bit left to right. And there's a lot of great stuff we can do in the simpler itself. We can actually play with the LFO in here, but let's just use Ableton's auto pan on it. Could also turn this into a chord, by the way, but I'm just holding a single string. So let's take out some kicks at the very end here. So carry again, like we've sort of seen a little bit, that could be nice to carry into here and continue to pitch down, right? So that's kind of what I just heard when I reached the end there. So instead of what I had a second ago, I might take this out. So I want to join those two notes together and then bring this more here. We might even go down in there, seventh or something like that, just to keep it kind of musically working its way. So there's a changeover point in here somewhere, and also those chords didn't trigger there as they're too far in front, so they need to come back into there. So just hearing that, so there's a little work to do here, but I like the idea of them overlapping and coming down and intersecting there into something new and interesting, and you can really feel how I'm sort of guiding that. I've built drum in here. I have added two elements, the claps and this, rather than just taking away. I point out that, as I said, don't just fall into the trap of just adding things as the answer. We could have, like, the thing is that we can execute this build a lot of ways. We started looking at the basics, volume, filters to do that, automating those, delay and reverb, turning them on and off to build drama. We can do that in a moment. There's still a lot to go here about making this really, really give every level of tension and drama that I want. But things like I'm showing you, you know, you can get creative, you can build your own layers here, and instead of reaching for a sample pack and trying to squeeze a riser or something into here, you might be able to rework your music a bit to build that drama, or add a high string. That's a classic move, been going on since the dark ages. There's also this audio that was already in here, but we built kind of some nice, I think, tension up. So that needs to be smoothed out. It could go all the way here. I can hear that. I'd really work on that musical change over here. And we haven't really studied to make sure that that new like little downwards chord I built here also musically fits with the string coming into there. So there's a little bit of thinking to go. One tip back here though, where it is in the main build, similarly to what I did with the noise, I can copy it over from the noise track. I've got a kickstart there, which is side chained to the kick. There's two kicks in this track, but it's side chained to one of the kicks, which has a bigger envelope, and it's ducking and moving it so it's not messing up the groove, the noise loop. So we want the same with this string loop, and it will really pump and move the string as well. So I'm going to option drag my kickstart over here, put it in front of all of that. Just make sure I left it on the noise as well. And it's going to do a nice job of not messing up my groove here. It's still going to slap the groove, and the string is now going to also pump. Right, static. Like I said, we want to get, if we're going to do these layers, we want to get away from that. We want keep them interesting. So what I would do here is I would extend this. Love how it's sweeping down into there. I'd extend it right across to that. So we want to kind of consolidate that, go back to the notes, make it legato, turn on loop, go back to the MPE, and we could continue to sweep it, but I think I like it sweeping to the seven semitones down to there, and we'd get a filter on this. We could use the filter built into the simpler, by the way, so we might grab that while we're here. We don't really need to add a filter after it. We could use the built-in one here to automate, and we're going to grab that, pop it down, and we're going to sweep our frequency down in here till it sort of fades away. Almost perfect now with the sort of smoothing of it into that area, right? Would work on it a little bit more, and I still would like to check musically that chord and that string note is the best fit there. And I can think here, we could pitch that note up. It could play for, 16 bars here, and then it could rise up or it could rise down, right? So again, your creativity, it could be a chord. Doesn't have to be just a single note, but I think it will be too much when it's a chord, but it could be a chord. Could also be like that. But yeah, my suspicion is there's no need for that. So back to what I had, but I'm sure you get the idea. Okay. So what else can we tweak a little bit in the time remaining for today's video? If you've got any questions, do feel free to drop them into the chat. I'm just going to wrap things up in about 5 minutes here. So do let me know if there's something that I haven't covered about the build and drop that you want to know. And I'm just going to make some adjustments here as we go along. So I'm going to use a little bit of filter action, particularly inside the main drop area now. So I quite like the build, We could have, maybe we could automate a delay on some of the percussion just to get a little bit more groove. Let's look for our choice. I have a feeling the top loop might be the best one. Yeah, so let's add a little bit of the B return here, centered return, to really ramp up this top loop. Again, just till the main payoff of the drop with a automation of the send and return of the built-in delay. And I'll kill it off before it gets there. A little bit more into here, or right to the end. Okay, so now to do a little bit of filter work, automated and sweeping, like I showed at the beginning. Instead of volume automation, I'm going to bring this top loop and I'm going to bring it virtually out. So I'm going to automate on and off of the auto filter, drop it down into the automation here, and we're going to sweep this top loop down, maybe killing it off and maybe bringing it back. So we might do like a little bit of a bringing it down and then bringing it back up again, which is one of my favorite things to do. So we're going to sweep down the cutoff filter. So we're turning it on. I'm going to open up the cutoff. I'm going to map this. So we've firstly mapped the on off button so we can control that. I'm going to sweep it down. Listen out for the point where we like it to almost go away, and then we might bring it back out open again, or we might completely remove it. And let's have a few things out so we can hear. Let's have another sound for context. Almost to silence. It's about here somewhere. Nice. And sweep it up. Well, we've got the closed hi-hat. Let's grab a filter for that. Oh, not pan. Filter. Let's automate on off. So as you can hear, if we just drop that on there and we don't take care of like what I'm doing now, it's already affecting the sound a lot, just plonking it on there. So for me, I'm always taking control of the on off and opening generally the frequency right up, particularly if I'm wanting to do what I'm trying to do. So we might have, in this case, this one follow the top groove a bit. So another tip I was going to say is sometimes I don't follow it, so I do something completely different, right? Got to sweep this one down earlier. So they're now doing their own independent automation with the filters, right? That could be nice because we get, again, a different energy ebbing and flowing a bit here. So we're sweeping the closed hi-hat down. We might curve this. And I would just continue to work through like that, just working away at what elements are in the drop, how they filter in and out. Not a lot of volume automation. You need to go back to the start of the video if you're watching this in replay, or you're here at the very end and you missed a lot of the early sections today. I sort of walked through why filter automation versus volume. So what we've kind of covered is the steps to building tension and release. We started with the very basics, that's what we can do. We can automate volume and filters to get tension and release by adding and removing energy. We figured out what we want to do between the two different sections. We looked at automating the delay and reverb either as a send and return workflow, or also applying it directly onto the track for different reasons, or a hybrid, creating more return tracks that give you different options like bigger delay, shorter delay, or bigger reverb, smaller reverb. We've then looked at our noise layer that we already had that was in audio and what we could do with that, or what we did do to it, but also how we could make sure that it's dynamic and more interesting than just a static layer. And then we played around a little bit with a few more advanced things. We've also added a couple of layers of a high string that's modulated as well to add tension, particularly in the build and drama. Also a clap 909 clap sort of fill and roll to do the same thing. And then we looked a little bit into the window of writing unresolved melodies or chords, and making, you know, tension out of the music notes that you write, and having descending and ascending chords or melodies, and specifically writing for moments where you reduce the emotion or energy, or you add, or you know, as I said, deliberately leave people hanging in a certain way. You're in control. You're the producer. You're the artist. You can guide them where you want to guide them. And the better you get at that storytelling, the more interesting your track will be, and the more you keep everybody on their toes, and the more it works well on the dance floor, and the more you communicate what people should be feeling at what moments in time. And you're, as I said, actually in charge of that. So if we have a quick little listen to what we've got so far, applying some of those things, and then we can do a quick check of what we haven't worked on. So we have a copy of the same area with nothing. So let's have a little play through from a little bit before and then a little bit after. Of course, there's a lot more to do here, just the tip of the iceberg, but hopefully it's useful to watch, learn, and hopefully listen and learn. I just realized something was switched off. Let's make sure everything's in. Sorry, my bad. Let's play from here. Right, and the big secret at this end, which we haven't spent a huge amount of time on, but you know, there's always, once we start digging into this, as you can see, there's always room for part 2, 3, 4, if we continue to be thorough and more advanced. But the very end of the drop here, what we really want to do is kick out more energy. So I like what happens to the end of the chords, but I would be going in track by track here, and every single one I'd start with, like, you know, essentially muting a big chunk of, you know, the audio here or the tracks in this area, and then working out what is going to play through and what isn't going to play through in this kind of final, you know, few bars here. And that is going to make a massive difference to the energy there. So you can mute it or you can pull it back, whatever you prefer, but I'm looking to leave a bit of space here at the very end of this break. That's going to make my drop hit a lot harder. So maybe this synth carries through a bit. We know our tops and hi-hats morph in and out. Okay, so the noise would be needed to work on a little bit. So this would sweep in and out at the very end, the noise will sweep away here. Something along those lines, right? So I'd work on that and fine tune it, and already we can really hear the impact of what happens here. It's always going to be stronger and stronger the more frequency and the more energy you take away there. That is a pro tip. Okay, so make sure you go through that at the end of your drops and work as hard as you can on removing. Sometimes even a whole bar of silence here can make that impact of this area all the more better. If it's not silence, it could be just tails and reverbs and delays, or it can be just what you, the minimum that you want to have in there that gives you the feeling. But try and remove as much as you can so that, again, that really hits hard. So capers, excellent method for tuning. Can you do a real quick recap? I think I did sort of more or less. Can you talk about leading the audience a little more before you go? Well, I guess, I mean, literally everything we've looked at is about that, right? It's literally in your hands, like when you're the storyteller and the arranger and you're doing this with your tracks and you're looking to build your tension and release. You know, you, with all the transitions and all the little elements you add, the little sweeps and reverse sounds and things we might also do here, fills. Think about that. You're not just adding decoration for the sake of it. You're not just breaking the track down for the sake of it. Really just work on that. Just work on the very basics, that if you break the track down, why? Does it function? When you listen to it, maybe I bounce this out in audio and I listen back to it later and I don't like the timing of that break, or it feels too long, or it's too short. You know, that's what you want to evaluate, is all those kind of things. Don't just have breaks for the sake of it. Put a break in your track to break it down, add that tension. It's going to make the drop hit harder, the build work better. That's what I'm talking about. You know, I think a lot of people don't realize that you are in charge here. You're in charge of what that person feels and listens when they listen back to your track. And a lot of that happens here. Build drama, take it away, to highlight what's going on. There's a phrase, there's a change, there's this flow. Depends also if you're making tracks for dance floors, for DJs, just the listening experience. But yeah, the answers I think you will find. I just give you a bit of a pathway to seeing what is possible, right? Because there isn't a rule book here, and this might change if I was writing a different genre. So quick shootout, if we listen to what we had listened to, and we group this, which is now kind of what we've done today. We take that group out, we throw the group in before we did anything. It should feel a lot more static, and it's just the music. So this was before we did any work. It sounds good. It's just the instruments and sounds coming in and out, where we decided that they'd come in and out before we started today's stream. I'd arranged this track to feel like what I want to happen, where I want it to happen, but with no consideration about builds or drops or the little steps that I start to do now when I want to do that. So listen out for here. Drops, but not with the impact where we would be heading. So now if we go to what we've done, we're obviously going to have a bit more drama in the build, and we got a little bit, we're starting to work on that end. We've also got a better change between the end of the build into the drop. We're working there. We've got more anticipation and drama in here. We're working on moving between the two sections, and then we're working on the end of it to make that pay off before the music comes back in the other side. Yeah, so have fun, play with it, be playful. I can already feel now that's starting to go somewhere, and I'm moving it somewhere where I want it to be moved. I want people, what I want people to feel at the end of that drop, what I want them to feel in the drop, what I want them to feel in the build. And if that string is too strong, you could make that more subtle. You don't have to have that. Just was showing you some techniques of how you can do that. And of course, pay attention to, if you do it, making them interesting. Same as snare rolls. There's a good snare roll and a really bad snare roll. And a good snare roll is dynamic. It doesn't stand still. It's not just a rhythmical pattern of snares. There's pitch changing, there's panning possibly, there's movement of the notes, there's longer notes, shorter notes, different rhythms, all of that. Delay, reverb, it's a dynamic snare roll. Boring snare roll doesn't, again, really make sense. The same as a break that doesn't need to be there. You want to work on those things and make them deliver. Why are they there? What are they doing? Are they the best you can make them? Work on that, guys and girls. Sorry before about the little interruption in the stream. No idea what happened there. OBS had a bit of a freak out. Thanks to those of you who stayed with me during that, and obviously bounced back in once we got back up and running again. I need to bounce. Capers, as always, pleasure over in New York, Brooklyn, New York. Hope you get some cooler weather soon. And yes, it's hot, hot, hot here. Adrian Dantas, was amazing to see you. I'm not sure if you're still here now, but great to see you again, my friend. And I hope you're doing well. And I'm glad there was some comments in the chat of people learning new things. That's what we're here for. So on that note, as always, if you did enjoy this live stream, push those buttons, which ones, they help the channel a lot. Share it with your friends, drop a comment about what you might want to see. This stream came about because I asked in my community posts, what would people like to see in this live stream? So I listen, I read. So tell me, if there's something I can help you with, and if it makes a good stream, I'm down for it, and I will do a stream on it. So as I said, like, comment, share, push those buttons. I will be back very, very soon, hopefully for a couple in the month of September. This month, as I said, apologies, only managed to get live once, but there are new videos coming all the time as well. Do check them out on the channel. There's lots of content there about Ableton tips, also pigments. I wish you all the very, very best. Keep on creating. And as I said, I look forward to seeing you all very, very soon. Have an amazing rest of your Sunday, and over and out. Bye for now, everybody. Take good care of yourselves, and see you soon. Ciao. Bye.